thank you for coming on, mate. I'm really I'm looking forward to this episode, as I've said now like 3 times.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the best place to kind of start this off is just kind of introduce who you are and kind of what your story is, and from there we can just if you'll take it away.
Okay.
When you're ready.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot's happened to me through the years. I mean, first of all, my name's Scott. Sorry, I didn't introduce myself. So when I was younger, it was kind of a difficult childhood I had, where first of all, my dad kind of left my brother and I, and obviously my mum, when we were, I think it was 7 or 8 years old, because I remember moving house in 2009, so I must have been like 8 years old probably. So then we didn't really have any contact with him at all. And I think my brother, which I'll come on to in a bit, had a lot of problems with that. And I didn't have as many problems. But then my mum, before that, was very ill. She had cancer. And I think that's how your mum and my mum became quite close. She had non-Hodgkin lymphoma, which is kind of like a cancer, it was at stage 4. So she was quite severely ill, but she managed to overcome that. And I think that's when I fell in love with hospitals, which we'll discuss a bit later as well. And and that's when I kind of like was a bit interested in medicine. And then I was quite ill when I was younger, which caused quite a lot of anxiety for me about the future and things like that. And I feel like I was very anxious, and I still am anxious about my health quite often. And that's where I think my anxiety kind of started. And I feel like it's very difficult to pinpoint where my anxiety started as well. But because I think, first of all, like mental health has become much more of a thing now, in the more recent years than back in the day. And I think identifying that I had anxiety at that age was quite difficult, say for my mum and my dad at the time. I don't really call him my dad, I call him Neil. So then that happened. And then when I was 17 and my brother was 16, he passed away. He passed away by jumping in front of a train. So it was quite a confusing childhood I had. And then I moved into uni in first year, where I was studying medicine, or I still am. But that's when I realized like my social support kind of shifted towards like all this support at home, where all my family around me, all my teachers were around me, all my friends were around me. And then I've kind of jumped into the deep end at university, and that's when I feel like I was very by myself, and I was like very, very depressed from that point onwards.
Yeah. I mean, from what it sounds like, you've gone through a lot. And I think, when things happen, when you go through life, it takes, you don't initially realize what it is you've gone through until, further down the line. And, one thing I'm, interested in kind of learning is, your response to the loss. How did that grief manifest? How did that kind of look like for you? Was it different to kind of the anxiety you had growing up, or, that's kind of, that's, I guess, my question.
Yeah. Well, I'm very much a believer of like the 5 stages of grief. And I don't know about you, but I felt like I went through most of those stages. I didn't really believe in the bargaining stage, but like denial at first. I remember, so I was 17 at the time, and I was just made deputy head boy like the week before Ollie passed away.
Yeah.
And I remember my teacher, I really love this teacher, Miss Jacobson. She basically said to me, like, I'm so happy that you've got deputy head boy, like you've gone through so much. And then the week after, then my brother passed away. And I remember when I was in so much denial, I remember I was at the funeral with my head teacher and my assistant head teacher, and we were just standing together. And I made a joke to my head teacher. I was like, oh, I wish he died a week later so I could be in head boy as a joke.
Yeah.
But like, I feel like I was extremely numb because I had such a good support system around me. So like I had a good girlfriend at the time. I had really good friendships with so many people. And then I had my mom and my family. I wasn't really understanding of what was happening. Like I didn't really have good understanding of what was happening. I was very, very like secluded from the idea that my brother has passed away. Because were you at the funeral? I can't remember.
Yes.
So I didn't even cry. Like I did the eulogy, and like thinking back, like I was just like, how did I not cry at my brother's funeral? And it was just, I was just so confused. Like the day of the day of his passing was, year 11 muck-up day for Yavna. He was at JFS.
Yeah.
And he went to Yavna previously. And it was a really weird day. So on that day, about 5 or 6 teachers, which never happens before, like came up and asked me how Ollie was and all of these things. And little did I know that he passed away in the morning before, like at 2 or 3 in the morning. And it was like a really weird experience. And then it was muck-up day, and I saw in the urinal was something like the students were doing. So I went to speak to my assistant head teacher I'm really close with, and I was like joking about it.
Yeah.
And he was really off with me, like really, really off with me.
Yeah.
And like, I just couldn't understand why. And then he was crying. And then 10 minutes later, he pulled me like from the hallway. He was like, come with me. And I was like, okay. And then I kind of like had a weird idea what was going on. And then he was driving home, and I was like, Ollie's dead, isn't he? Like, without me actually like even knowing what was going on, I just knew like something happened. And I knew because there were warning signs, which I guess I didn't really recognize when Ollie was like alive. But like, I kind of knew from the situation that was going on that he has kind of passed away. So we drove home, and then my mum sat me down and told me. And I remember she was with a family friend, Marcel, and she was like crying and everything. And then my rabbi was there. And then, I mean, this is a coping mechanism of what I used to do as growing up. Was like, so basically I was with my assistant head teacher, and I was like, okay, I've got chemistry next period, I need to go.
Yeah.
Like I did, and what I think we need to discuss as well is like how I basically removed all emotion from like situations by just working.
Yeah.
And like my first thing was I need to go back to chemistry. Like it was just a really weird way of me coping. And that's basically what I did from after Ollie's passing. Like, cause I was so numb, I just put my head in my books. I was like, okay, I need to do my interviews to get into med school. I need to do my entrance exams to get into med school. I'll get into med school, and then it'll be perfect. And then it just never was. Like, it just never was perfect.
Well, it's almost like you said, it's a form of kind of replacement. And I remember, thinking back to Mum's, shiver and the funeral, and that idea, it hadn't kicked in yet. It didn't feel real. You almost, yes, you're in this position where, everyone's coming to support you and give you, warmth and love, but it doesn't, it doesn't make sense until time has passed. I remember it could be weeks after, and you almost there's an expectant that, your mum's going to walk through the front door, and it's all this big joke, and now we can kind of get on with life and return back to a sense of normality. But the reality is, that normality, has gone. Your life that you once knew has drastically shifted, and until you address that, and until you kind of realize, it will always be kind of lingering there. And that's definitely something, I found. My initial response was to head back to university. I remember at the time, it was a week after her passing. It was kind of Halloween, and Halloween was a big night out at uni. Like fancy. I hate fancy dress personally.
Me too.
You know what I mean?
Me too.
Like fancy dress with me a bit of blood on my face.
Rip the t-shirt.
Yeah, exactly. But I was thinking, you're at university, you want to go out and enjoy yourself. And I remember going on this night out, and as soon as I started to drink, and as soon as I kind of felt a bit, allowed myself to kind of, well, I wouldn't say allowed myself to grieve, but as soon as I felt vulnerable, I just started crying. All that, despite it only being, it was a week later, up until that point, there was a sense of numbness. I think, in my situation, I dealt with this idea of cancer for a long time, and you build up a sense of, resilience and I always felt she was going to pass. But once it happens, you don't adjust, to your new reality. And so once I remember being on this night out, and I remember it so well, I started drinking, and grief and alcohol probably aren't the best combination.
Alcohol is depressing.
Yeah, exactly.
It just doesn't help.
So it's not a substitute. But I just broke down, and after that, I think the grief waves hit. I'm interested to see, you know, going forward, how has your kind of attitude towards, you know, grief and your kind of emotions, how's that sort of changed?
Yeah. So as I was saying before, like the 5 stages, like I feel like denial was very much a stage before I got to university. I then got to university, and because I was like so alone and like with my thoughts, that's when I feel like the anger and like depression kind of kicked in, where I mean, I was crying nearly every single night before I was like going to bed, or even crying myself to sleep.
And would this be something you would discuss with your friends?
Not the crying, because I feel like at that time I was like, oh, I'm a man, like I don't cry, I don't tell people. And then I've kind of obviously developed, like I really think that's a normal thing to do, and like it's a normal thing to discuss as well with people. And I feel like, I mean, especially I was speaking to my friends now and they tell me they're crying. Like it's a normal thing for us to discuss now, but I feel like when we were younger, we were very embarrassed to say that. And then like I used to have night terrors. So night terrors are basically this thing where like you have these nightmares from like basically being depressed, and like I'd have like me dying in them, or I see Ollie there and like he's really upset or crying, and like it was a really nasty kind of like sleeping routine I used to have. And then I was basically forced, well, I wasn't say forced, but like I was told I needed to go into therapy. And therapy was very much a thing I never liked, because I was like, I'm not a big talker. I didn't like talking. So I first went into Grief Encounters, which was amazing organization, which I really, really was appreciative at the time. But I feel like I wasn't ready for it. Like I wasn't ready to talk. And I feel like if you are going to therapy, you need to be able to express your emotions. And I wasn't able to express my emotions at that time. Then I had a couple of other therapists, then I moved into CBT, which I found very, very interesting. Like, I mean, we can talk about this for a long while, but like, I mean, there was this psychiatrist that I was seeing, and I used to always say to him, like, I need you to fix things for me. I need you to make me happy. But like I think I've realized probably since June, actually, like it's not even been that long. It's like about happiness and how I would have this constant search in first year, second year, third year, like of university, of like for happiness and like how I can find it, how I can sort things out, how I can fix my problems. Like, and then I kind of realized, and I also watched something recently, I can't remember what it was, but like it was a psychiatrist, and he was basically saying like, if you're in constant search for happiness, you'll never be happy. And like, if you finally accept that you can't fix every problem, like you will be able to be happy, because you never will be able to live in the moment. You'll never be happy in the situation you are, which I found like interesting, because that is kind of what I've been doing subconsciously for a couple of months now, and I'm much, much happier. And first year was a bit of a mess, and then we went into lockdown, and then
what was that for you?
Well, lockdown was a bit of a weird one, because I don't play Fortnite, or I don't do any of that stuff, and that's what the boys were doing. Like every single night was like they'd meet like religiously at like 8 p.m. Fortnite. They're going their squads, whoever it is. But like I don't know, I kind of got into like working out a lot. So like I started working out like 2 or 3 times a day. Like I'd go on a run, like a long run. Me and my mate Dylan Bull, we used to try to like beat each other. So he'd be like, oh, I've ran 16k, so then I'd run 18k, and we'd just do that during lockdown, which was kind of fun. And yeah, I still had uni. So like most universities stopped their degree, but like for some reason, like we had to still carry on doing medicine. So we started like do all these like dissections. Like we had to watch them online, and like all these lectures for like a couple of like, I think it was like 2 more months. And then we had to do our exams, which were formative. Like they didn't count towards anything, but like during lockdown, I still was very much occupied with those things. So it wasn't as bad. Like I wasn't really, really bored, because I still kind of had work, and I was working out as well. Yeah. So it wasn't terrible. But then my papa got really ill, and then he went into hospital, and then he caught COVID in hospital. So then I moved in with my grandma, because she was like kind of by herself and lonely, and like she was like crying every night, and I was like, Mom, I'm not having this. So like I moved in with her, and honestly we had the best time. Like for like 2 months we stayed with each other. We like used to go on walks. I loved it, and I used to get so much food as well. So I loved it.
Beats grandma's cooking.
Yeah, nothing. So lockdown, I don't think was very like a bad experience for me, and it wasn't a very like a bad mental health stage for me. So I was quite lucky in that way. I mean, although my papa was ill, but like it was okay for me. Yeah. And then I moved into second year, so I moved into a house with boys that I knew before university, but like weren't that close with. And then I don't know. I think second year, like as we discussed, how like my progression of like my mental health kind of moved from from Ollie passing to that. This was like the year I feel like I was the most depressed, and then, I mean, it's quite like triggering what I'm about to say, but like this is when I was like most suicidal.
Yeah.
I mean, I was highly suicidal in first year, and then second year just like topped it off. Like every single day, like I just wished I like would die. Like I've never had any suicidal intentions, but like, I mean, like I used to go to bed like always saying to myself, tomorrow will be a better day.
Yeah.
Like, and I used to. It was. I mean, it happened in third year as well. Like before bed.
And was this connected to the passing of Ollie, or was this just a culmination of things?
I think it was just a combination of things. Like I was kind of just done with life. And I think medicine in general, in second year, is like very much lecture based. So like it was lectures from like 9 to 4 every single day. And I was just like, I was so bored. Like, and I just kind of had enough. And third year as well, I was very much depressed as well. And I kind of had these same kind of intentions. But like, I felt like I could never, ever, ever like kill myself because first of all, I know what the resulting like kind of like environment is for like the family and the friends and how bad it is, but also like I kind of thought my brother was selfish in a way because like why could he do it and I couldn't, because like now he's done it, like I can't kind of situation. But like I've never had any hate for my brother, and I kind of, as I'm more depressed, I kind of realize more why he did it. So I don't know, it was a very difficult couple of years. And then moving into this year, like, as I mentioned before, like I'm intercalating this year. So I'm not actually studying medicine, and I have a lot more time to like kind of regather my thoughts and think what I kind of want to do and how I can improve my mental health. So in like June, I've always been against this for so many reasons. And I used to think it was like a plaster, but I started antidepressants. I used to like, my friends, when I told them like I'm on antidepressants, they were shocked because I was so against them. I thought like, why can't I just change how I think rather than just taking medication? And I think that there is a massive stigma, massive stigma of medication. And I guess it's nothing you should force anyone to do, but I think you should open up the possibilities for them. Do you remember when we went to Downing Street for, so basically,
how could I forget going to Downing Street?
So
did that happen?
So I'll explain for the podcast.
For sure.
But so my mum's partner Stephen and Murto and I, we basically set up a charity or a trust called the Ollie Leigh Trust.
Well, you've ruined my sick question.
Sorry.
No, I'm joking.
So we basically set up this charity to provide money to certain charities that help with mental health. So we have 4 charities which we provide grants to, and each year we change up the charities, or we keep some charities and we provide money to them. And what they do is, so for example, we have this Ollie Leigh, we have the Ollie Foundation. Just so happens it was called Ollie. Where we like have this Ollie Leigh legacy program where we're actually just starting, where they go into like educational institutions and help teachers and students like mental health, like workshops and things like that. We also have another one called the Inspirational Group, and we also have 2 other ones called Sports Against Suicide, where so say for example, like you know how like in academies children or like adults are like let off by football teams or rugby teams, so it's how they can like deal with that, and like it's very much zoomed into those kind of situations. Then we also have another one, I can't remember if you remember this, but Ripple, do you remember Ripple? So it's an amazing charity which actually I think works with the government now, where it removes suicidal content. And like, so we hosted this charity event in Downing Street, amazing event. But when I was there, like, I mean, I was chatting to you, I was chatting to a couple of people, but like, I just thought I was so hypocritical being there. Like, what was I doing there when I was so suicidal, when I literally didn't want to like live anymore, and I'm trying to preach mental health to people? I just felt so uncomfortable. I mean, my mum doesn't even know this, but like, I just felt so uncomfortable being there because like, what I was doing was just being a lie. Like, I'm just lying to people about how important it is when I literally just want to die. Like, it was just a very difficult situation for me. So then June came, and then I started taking antidepressants, and I wouldn't say that's like the biggest factor of why I've changed, but I'd say it's a massive like change in my perception of life. And I'm very much happier now.
Yeah. I think when it comes to antidepressants, you know, it become, you know, because I've been on antidepressants for a while, and the thing, you know, I learned is you can't solely rely on them. You know, it's got to be a combination of, you know, it's a little boost. You know, it helps you. You know, maybe you probably know more scientifically, but it balances out your chemicals. But what it also does is you've got to then connect that with that sense of, you know, whether it is playing sport, whether it is, you know, getting your thoughts in, you know, in you know, regular order. And it's a combination of, yes, it's a little bit of help, but you've also got to help yourself.
Yeah,
and you know, so yeah, I think going on antidepressants, like you said, it works for some people, it doesn't work for everyone. And you know, but it's all a learning curve, and you find what works for you, and you kind of, you know, and you accept that. Having, what I'm interested though, having, you know, the Ollie Leigh Trust, have it, you know, in keeping his kind of legacy around, and knowing, you know, people will benefit and feel the support from the work that the trust is doing. Do you feel like close to him, or, you know, do you feel that his legacy is still continued?
Yeah, so I feel like definitely at the time when Ollie died, I think it was a big thing for me, like people forgetting Ollie. Like obviously when we grow up, people will always remember, oh, that boy that like passed away from suicide. I used passed away actually, funny enough, because I watched a podcast with you and Grant.
Yeah.
And like he was like, no, he didn't like the like way of like killing like death or whatever.
Yeah.
Like I use like pass, which I really like now.
Yeah.
But so like him passing away, I was very scared of like everyone forgetting who he was, like the memories that they would have with him. And I feel like the actual trust is very much like I would say it's a massive thing for my mum, because like I feel like she's able to hang on and like keep the memory alive through him.
Yeah.
I would say like the charity is a massive thing for me, but I wouldn't say it's like a thing where I need a charity. I think, sorry, I don't feel like a charity is needed personally for me, for people to remember him.
Yeah.
Because like I'll have my friends and we'll discuss things,
Yeah.
and like we'll always like remember funny things he did or what we did with him. So like I feel like the charity is really good for my mum, but like just talking with my friends about things is like very much a thing for me to keep his legacy alive. But yeah, like I don't know. It's just, I mean, like, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. I think that idea of legacy is incredibly important.
Yeah.
And, you know, one of the things Mum said to me, one of the last kind of things, conversations she had was, she said, don't let anyone forget me. And you kind of think, what, you know, how can that be a possibility? You know, how can someone who's physically here, how can you forget that person? But the reality is, you know, possibly conversations about that person, you know, over time become less. You know, the memories of said person also, you know, are less. And, you know, it's inevitable that they won't be forgotten, but it's important to, you know, relight and keep that legacy going. And that's why, you know, I do this, because, you know, the importance of but that also comes through conversation, like you were touching on, and having those conversations with your friends. You know, is that something you're able to do? Is that something, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I struggled with it a lot at the beginning. Like I wouldn't, you know how like you say, oh yeah, he's my brother, or like sorry, I didn't explain that properly. Like did not explain. So like, you know, when you were there with mates and yeah, like, oh yeah, like, I don't know, Joe's my brother. Like I could never ever do that. Like it was just like something difficult for me to say, like, cause like I can discuss my brother. I could never say like, oh yeah, what are you saying, bro, or something like that. Like it was just something very difficult.
The connotation.
To say. Yeah, the connotation of the word, bro. Like it was just really difficult for me to say. I mean, even his name, like I couldn't say Ollie's name for like 3 years probably. Like I really struggled to say his name. And even when I said to my friends, yeah, I'm doing Joe's podcast, they're like, what? They're like so confused of like me being able to talk about my brother, because like I just would never, like I would just never ever. And like more recently I'm being able to. But yeah, so like I feel like at the beginning, people used to like want to talk to me about my brother, and I just it wouldn't be like me getting very awkward. It's
got to be on your terms.
Yeah, I agree with that, but like it's sometimes, say on his birthday, like people want to like remind me of like memories they had with him.
Yeah.
Like back in the day, I used to find that extremely hard. Like I still want to hear anything. Like it's not like I got awkward. It was like I was cringing. Like I just couldn't deal with it. Like I just didn't want to hear it because like I just didn't want to face it. Kind of.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's much better now. Like even his birthday was a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah. How was that?
Yeah, it was good. I mean, I think this year was the first time I've kind of like been able to talk about it. Like I put up an Instagram post because also we're doing this charity campaign at the moment. So I was like able to talk about it, and like all my friends were shocked, like as well, like how I've put something up there because like I'd never ever talk about Ollie. But yeah, birthdays and like the anniversary on the day he passed, like I used to find it extremely difficult. I mean, I kind of still do, but I turn off my phone.
I don't think that changes. I
feel like it like the way you deal with it though does change.
Yeah,
like
for sure.
Like, I mean, I used to not speak to anyone. I'd go to bed. I'd cry all day. Not want to speak to. Like, I'd have panic attacks the whole time. And then I kind of like past couple of years, I've been able to like talk to people about it. I've been able to go out for lunch, say with someone, or like do something with someone. So like, it's kind of changed now because I feel like I'm able to face like what's happened and able to talk about things like about my brother without cringing or being awkward about things.
Yeah, I get that. And why is it you think you used to find this awkwardness talking about your brother?
Because I wasn't ready to like face the problems of like A, that I was facing, or like depression and what it was causing me to have, but like B, because like I just don't think I was like still like I didn't believe my brother was dead. Like I just couldn't like believe like what was going on, and like it's just like it was still a shock for me. I was still very numb towards it. So like I just couldn't face it really. So I just didn't want to hear it.
Yeah. You know, one of the things I'd be very interested to know is, what was Ollie like, and what was, your relationship with Ollie like?
So Ollie and I were born 13 months apart. We were like born very closely because like my mum had some problems and things. So like my mum basically just wanted like another baby very quickly. And like, so we were very, very close. Everything we did, I mean, from day one, like matching clothes, same like play date, same friends, like everything. Like he had all the same friends I had, like, especially when he moved to JFS, like all the friends at JFS were my friends at JFS. So like, I'd always say, like, we'd always go like on nights out together. We'd always see each other at events or whatever. So like, we were like very, very close. The last thing I remember we ever saw each other was when we came home from school. So he was at JFS at the time and I was at Yavna. Came home from school and my mum was at work or something, and he was teaching me how to like make a pizza like properly and like how to toast the sweet corn on top of things and stuff. Like I can't fully remember how it was, but we used to just talk about rubbish like the whole time. So like we just did everything together, like played football together, like everything. He was a really, really good boy. Like he was very caring. He used to care a lot about other people's feelings.
Yeah.
He used to do a lot of charity work. He's like, my mum was like very much like giving back because like of our like upbringing. Like she was always like, you should always give back and like, help people. Like my mum's an amazing person. Like she just knows what to do and like to do the correct things. So like we always did things together. Like in the holidays, we used to like, especially Christmas, like we used to play COD the whole time. Like we were obsessed, like everything, absolutely everything we did together. And then I think I wouldn't say our relationship deteriorated. I feel like as you get older, obviously you aren't with each other as much. Like you do the other things. But like I feel like when he started to become quite depressed, he became very resistant to like doing things. Say for example, I mean, handball. Not handball. What am I talking about? Futsal. He used to play futsal. I don't know why I said handball. He used to play futsal, and he used to play for Maccabea as well. At Maccabea. So like he basically like he just got very angry very quickly and like very short fused, and like sometimes he'd want me to drive him and never my mum, because like my mum used to tell him off because he was acting irrationally, and he was acting irrationally. Like he was very depressed, he was very confused, and he was acting out at school, and like school wasn't very good with him and didn't treat him correctly, and like didn't know how to deal with situations and identify that he was struggling kind of. So then like our relationship kind of like grew apart to the point where I was very much head in my books, like I was working, and kind of like also I was working a lot more because like my mum and my brother were arguing, so like I used to just ignore it by working.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like by like I don't know, it was like by 2017, 2016, so like he was in year 11 moving into year 12. That's kind of when our relationship kind of like changed, because he was this very depressed kind of guy, and he wasn't like really happy at all, and wasn't really talking about things, and I didn't really know him. Like, he was very much a different guy at this point. And like, as a child, you don't ever think your brother...
Why do you think he changed?
Because he was just very depressed. Like, I think, as I said before, like the issues with his dad, with my dad as well, Neil, he basically had a lot of problems with how like he kind of was neglected by him, and like like those type of things. And like I think I don't know why properly, but like he just got very depressed very, very quickly, and like it just all kind of happened at once. But yeah, so he was just very depressed for a couple of years, and then my mum tried to do a lot of things. Well, first of all, moved him from Yavna because he wasn't happy with the environment for certain reasons. So he moved from Yavna to JFS, and then I feel like JFS was just a point where, because it's such a big school, like you can't concentrate on a child like you do in like say Yavna, where there's a lot less students and a lot more attention from teachers. And I feel like he kind of got lost in the system in JFS, and he had his GCSEs. And I don't blame myself for this, but one of the reasons why he was getting quite stressed at the time for his GCSEs and just before his passing was because the year before I got such good grades, he was just like I got a couple of remarks, and I used to be like, oh, I got another A star or something, and he used to get very angry about that, like because I kind of think I don't know, maybe unintentionally I put a lot of pressure on him to do well, and he was always more clever than me. But yeah, I feel like that was one of the reasons why he got quite stressed out as well.
He was very artistic, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was very artistic. I mean, I don't know if you've seen all the drawings he's done.
Yeah, I've seen a few of them.
Well, that's also another thing, like, we kind of didn't realize, like, my mother and I, like, how his drawings, like, we didn't see them. But then when he passed away, we kind of saw them. And it was kind of harrowing because, like, you'd see, like, him, like, drawing Simpsons with, like, a bong in the hand, or, like, someone smoking a zoo or something like that. And then you'd have the really nice drawings of, like, I don't know, I think there's this like this girl who's like got this really like nice wavy hair, and like it's really not like really cool drawings. And then you'd have the other drawings, and these other drawings were kind of scary. And like, I'm surprised like he never showed anyone these, but like it was people like hands together, knees up, into like in a position where like someone's sitting in a corner crying and things. And like there'd be like actually the emblem of like of the Ollie Trust is like someone's head, and then it's like an explosion from the head. Like he'd have all these like kind of depressive drawings along with the other drawings, which I find quite interesting now, because like how was I not seeing these signs? Like it's quite confusing, and how like he would like compartmentalize these things and hide these things from people. And yeah, like I mean, it's probably one of the signs of like someone that was quite depressed, and we didn't really see that because he didn't show us the drawings.
Yeah. And, you know, this is probably quite a hard question, but, you know, do you blame yourself for not seeing those signs?
The awareness we have nowadays, I feel like maybe 3 or 4 years later, this would never have happened, because I feel like there's much more awareness.
I think, yeah.
Because at the time, I found it quite ironic, because I remember like, it was like a year after Ollie passed, I was still at school, and it was like mental health awareness week, which we never had before, and it was we've brought in a social like a welfare guy that was helping. Like all these things were starting to happen like a year after Ollie passed, and like you'd have all these podcasts, and you had like, you know, Alex, the guy from Love Island, and he talks about like
Dr. Alex.
Yeah, Dr. Alex, talking about like mental health, and all these things started to happen after Ollie died. So I wouldn't say like, I feel like it was very hard for me to see these signs when I wasn't really taught them.
Sure.
And like,
it was an education thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's definitely an education thing.
Without the premise, you know, without learning, you know, what are these emotions? Unfortunately, you know, when we were growing up, you know, 13, 14 in school, It wasn't a conversation.
Yeah.
And whether or not these emotions and experiences that you faced, unfortunately, as a young person, to have all of these put on your plate, it's overwhelming.
Yeah.
And not having that, so it's amazing that things are making strides, in the right direction and addressing these, and definitely, I think how conversations now, some of the conversations over the years I've had with friends, off podcast, because everything doesn't need to be cameras and lights, you know what I mean?
Big brother.
But some of the conversations I've had in the last couple of years are just, amazing, and really a real sense of vulnerability and connection, and it's kind of emphasized to me how important sharing your emotions are, and if you are in a bad place, you don't need to be alone, and it's not something. It's something you have to find out for yourself, and if I came. If I said to you, right, Scott, we're doing a podcast 3 years ago or 2 years ago, you wouldn't have done it because you wouldn't have been ready. Yeah. And to have that conversation, you have to be ready, but it's also incredibly, rewarding and cathartic.
Yeah.
But yeah, for sure, I think I can't imagine, at the time, losing a brother. Someone I imagine, having your Neil walk out of your life, and your brother, as you said, was someone you were incredibly close to. I can't imagine how difficult the last couple of years have been. How has your kind of, I mean, you've told me about your relationship with grief, but I guess yourself, how has your relationship with that kind of changed?
I mean, I'd say at the beginning when Ollie passed, I was numb. There was no emotion. I feel like it was more when I moved to university. It was then I was very depressed, and how I dealt with myself. I'd hate myself. I'd hate everything I did. Hate how I looked, and that's part of the reason why I worked out so much during the summer. I hate the way I dressed. I hated the way I spoke to people. I hate the way I was socially anxious. I hated the way I wasn't able to understand things so quickly in medicine. There was so much hate towards myself, and I just couldn't bear the person I was. And I feel like I was so nasty to myself, and I was nasty to myself.
Prior to Ollie's passing, did you feel this way?
No, I would say I was pretty happy. I wouldn't say I was the happiest, but I was pretty happy. I had the nice environment with my friends, my family. I was happy. I feel like there were some warning signs that Scott was struggling. There were there was times where I'd be quiet or anxious about things. I definitely was anxious when I was younger. I remember my mum used to always be to my teachers when I was in primary school, he gets really worked up, and I was very anxious about my health as well. These things were still a problem before he passed, and then I guess they were exacerbated as I moved into first year uni.
Yeah.
And I was just kind of very depressed, and a lot of self-hate, a lot of anxiety. The panic attacks were ridiculous. I'd have panic attacks probably once a week, twice a week. I'd be in the library and I couldn't understand something, and I'd have to run into the stairways because I couldn't breathe and things like that. And there was a lot of
and this was at university.
Yeah, this was at university.
Panic attacks they're horrifying. I remember having one on a night out. Everything bloody happens on a night out.
Yeah, it does.
The lesson is don't go on a night out.
Don't have fun.
Just stay at home. And I was kind of enjoying myself, and all of a sudden, I think it just clicks. Something happens. There was I think what I used to do a lot is evaluate everything I used to say.
Yeah.
The social anxiety, I would say, why did I say that? That wasn't funny. There was no reason. You're a loser for saying that. And then you go down this cycle, and then all of a sudden, I think because of the grief, because of this overthinking, this social anxiety, I just had all of this going on, and I kind of it just erupted. And I remember I've never had anything like this before. But I was I couldn't breathe. Like I was really struggling to come to terms with what was going on, and you know, I think the easiest thing to do in that situation is just escape and kind of remove yourself from. And so I think to observe that, it can be a bit confusing to see you know, a friend sort of not knowing how to, not, you know, being what is quite uncontrollable. It must be quite, you know, I don't know how, you know, some of my friends were amazing and you know, but it must have been very difficult for them to see, because I couldn't explain what was going on.
No, I get
it
that.
was just, it was an emotional response to what was occurring.
Especially them so young as well. Like, it's probably their first time they're seeing these things, and like they didn't know how to react towards it. And I feel like that's happened to me as well. But like, I completely understand when you're saying like your friends are seeing this, like it's so raw and like so like new to them. Like they just didn't know how to react kind of towards it. And I feel like I don't blame anyone. I don't think you would as well. But like, I don't blame anyone for how they react to things, because it's probably their first time dealing with these things. And also like every situation is very different. But like they're never going to be able to come in, like understand us, like put themselves into our boots. So, like they would just never ever be able to understand like the emotions, the overwhelming emotions we have. And like that's something which I feel like you and I kind of share, like where it's so hard to expect people to understand what's going on. And I feel like that was a massive struggle I had as well, and I still have as well, because like especially like moving into fourth year. So I'm moving into fourth year, and a lot of people have left uni now. And I live with non-medics. I live with non-Jews. I don't live with people that I was friends before university. And like I find it so difficult for them to understand, especially like my friends that also didn't really know me before uni. So like understand who I was and how I deal with emotions, because like I don't ever expect them to understand, but like it's just so hard to like for them to understand who I am. And I just feel like I find it so difficult sometimes, because like as you said, like I do like remove myself from situations almost like as a punishment for how I've acted in public, because like I'm kind of angry in the way I've like been, or like kind of said something I shouldn't have, or like I mean, even when I was talking to you about like CBT, I remember at one point I was so self-conscious about everything I said. Like he'd make me write down the name of the person I spoke to, what I said, and then we basically would analyze that in the session. And like at the end of the session, I'd just be like I'm an idiot. Like, what was I overthinking about? But like
it comes down to that idea, you know, when you're in that moment, you don't think from a rational perspective. It's purely emotional, and once you know, is how I found writing and you know, kind of digesting your thoughts, and it is almost comical, because you're observing, you know, when you're the thing I find hardest is, you know, when you're in a good place, to remember the emotions and the thoughts when you weren't in the good place. It's very difficult to, you know, to when, you know, for example, if I was in a bad place, some of the things, you know, I'm like, how am I going to succeed in life when you know, I'm feeling like this? How can I converse in a business setting if I'm feeling this way? But then when I'm in a good place, though, that's not even something I think about. And so it's like, you know, I have a lot of empathy for the Joe who goes through that, because those dark days are so hard. And I think the one thing that, you know, I don't do enough when I'm in that place is that idea of kindness, and I beat myself up for being there, which I think just exacerbates it further. You know, for feeling low and for feeling all these kind of natural things, you know, in response to trauma and in response to, you know, the grief we face. But I give myself a hard time, and I think it's just sometimes that acknowledgement, you know, they will come. You know, things like that. What you've gone through it's horrific and upsetting. But when you're in that position, you know, this is how I cope with it. But I just kind of acknowledge, you know, it's gonna happen, and and that's fine. You know, it's fine, and you know, I think it's great, you know, coming on to, you know, being a medic actually, because one of the reasons, you know, I wanted to do this was, you know, to help people and help conversation, you know, and I mean, I assume you always wanted to be a medic.
Yeah, probably from a very young age. Yeah,
and was that in response to, you know, you mentioned there was kind of like a health anxiety because of your mum's.
Yeah, I mean, it was, so first of all, I was ill and my mum was ill, and then my brother's best friend's dad. It was funny because I saw him at Shiver later on. I'll explain the story, but he was a orthopedic surgeon, which is a bone doctor, and he basically like fascinated me. Like I'd see like on the shelves like all like these bones and like all like the labeling towards it. And I loved it. And then my mum started to buy me textbooks, like medical textbooks. I was a freak when I was younger. Like I was just like reading all these medical textbooks about the blood system and like the veins, arteries, all of these things. I loved it. Like I absolutely, I was obsessed. And then I basically saw that guy at Shiver probably 10, 15 years later. It was my first year of university. And I said to him like, oh yeah, I'm studying medicine now because of you. You're like, don't say that. Like, don't blame me for that. Like, it's only going to get worse. But yeah, I mean, anyone listening that wants to be an aspiring medic, do not say in their interview, I want to help people. But yeah, like I did want to help people. Like I feel like giving back is such a massive thing for me. Like I just want to pay. I think it's because I've gone through so many difficulties. I want to make people's lives easier. Like even like sharing my notes at med school to like year belows, like I love doing, because like I was always that medical student that would love to get the year above notes because it just makes it easier. Life easier. Like I've always want to help. I want to help people, like teach them like medical stuff basically. Like I just really wanted to help them, and I still want to help them. So yeah, it's like it was very much a thing. Like I just always want to give back, and like especially in such an amazing occupation as medicine and like as a doctor. Obviously it has a silly amount of negatives, but like just like the pure emotion, like you see, like, even like third year, you're on for my university, you're on rotations. So like when you see patients and you're just helping them, even like as a third year medical student, like you do nothing. Like you take some blood, you do an ECG, you do the blood pressure, like you don't do much. Like you think you're a doctor, you think you're the shit, but you don't do anything. But like even just like speaking to them,
you've
like
just broken the hearts of a lot of third years.
Sorry,
crying
guys.
At home.
Yeah, they can do a lot more later on. But yeah. So you just like speak to patients for say like 10, 15 minutes, taking like a history and like caring about them and taking an interest in them. Like it honestly makes their day, and like it's their highlight of the day. I just love that. I just love making people happy. I love helping people and like in any way possible. And I feel like obviously an occupation such as medicine, you are able to do that. And I feel like that's why I just have such a love for medicine, because I just love learning as well. Like I'm obsessed with learning, but like I also love giving back.
Yeah. The thing I found is though, you know, as a surgeon, as a doctor, you can't, and this is from observing how there was the interaction with my mum, you know, you can't have empathy for everyone, you know, as in the sense that when she was in a position, and sometimes these incredibly intelligent people would sort of say what was going on, but as a matter of fact, you know, for example, in a cancer position, you know, there wasn't that kind of element of empathy. But I suppose it's you know, some doctors will, some kind of.
Yeah, I mean, I've met many doctors, and like you do as a medical student, you're always told like pick the best things from that doctor and take them on, and then to make yourself a better doctor. So like there are doctors that are straight talkers. There's ones that that don't beat around the bush. There's ones that, I mean, it's basically the same thing I just said. But there's also one.
I love that phrase, by the way. Don't beat around the bush. Like, what does it even mean? Like, everyone knows what it means.
Yeah, it's true. What is the bush? Yeah, what is the bush? What are you beating? So like, there's also ones that are really empathetic and ones that do take a lot more time with patients. I mean, it's very different. Each specialty is very different. Say like ICU doctors have a lot more time per patient, so they're allowed to give more empathy, or not more empathy, but they're allowed to have more time with the patient.
Yeah.
And I feel like patients think they're much kinder doctors because they're spending more time. But like there are certain doctors, say like an F1, which is like a newly graduated doctor, like doesn't have that amount of time to give. But like it's very different. It's different, but like every doctor wants to give as much empathy as they can. But like, yeah, I guess doctors in situations such as oncology, which is cancer, like just like I feel like they are trying their best and they do try to give as much empathy as possible. It's just, I guess, doctors do see it very, very often.
Exactly.
And they kind of, I wouldn't say they get immune to it, because I don't feel like that you ever get immune to like situations, like, because you always will have a heart and it always will be sad. But I think they get desensitized, I think is the better word. Like they get desensitized to situations. And yeah, I feel like, say you saw...
Well, it's compartmentalizing, isn't it? When
Yeah.
you're in that position, you have not a job to do, but you remove yourself from the emotional element,
Yeah.
and you have, you want to make this patient better.
Yeah.
I suppose it's like, in a way, when I have these conversations, for me, I'm not comparing myself to,
Yeah.
but it's that sense of you remove the sadness and you just converse, because, and it's possible to do that.
Yeah.
One thing I would actually love to know is what are the medical interviews like?
Medical interviews. Okay, so depending on what university, they have different interviews. There's a panel interview for some universities where you have like 3 professionals. I mean, some could be doctors, some might just be like admin staff, like that know their stuff, and like they want to see what they that you can give to the medical school. But then you'd also have these things called MMIs, where you go around in stations. I think it was 6 or 8, I can't remember, and each station would ask a different thing. And it's like, I don't know if I'm allowed to. I don't think I'm allowed to say these things.
Okay.
But like, there's certain ones where they'll be like, what's your greatest strength? What's your biggest weakness? And obviously, you don't want to expose your weaknesses. You give like a clever response, kind of. But you prep these. You do always have to like talk about your work experience. There'll be like situations where like, how would you prioritize? I don't know, this patient's that's got this, and this patient's that got this. Say like an 84-year-old that's having some problem, but then there's also a 5-year-old girl that needs this, like things like that. And then you'd have stations where you talk about like CCGs, which are like clinical commission groups, where you talk about like how you can improve certain things in the NHS and what you can do and change. I don't know, it's a very weird, intense environment at an interview. I
love the classic, what is your weakness? Just go, I just work too hard.
Well, yeah, that's one of them. And they don't like that answer. You've got to be clever. You've got to be clever.
I'm just the hardest worker. I don't know when to say no.
So like, each university, I remember one of my friends got into a certain university. I'm not going to say his name, but I got into a certain university, but didn't get into one university that I got into. And he got into a very prestigious university and I didn't. Kind of like, so like each university looks for different things.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's how they teach their course and how adaptable you will be with that course. Like that's what they're looking for, and how you will bring something for their medical school as well. So like, I don't know, like medical interviews are pretty intense, but I'm looking back at them and I'd never ever want to do them again. But yeah, they ask certain things. Obviously, I can't say certain things. But
off camera, you can. Well, mate, thank you again for joining me today.
No worries.
I think this was a really, really great episode, and there was a lot from your kind of experiences and perception that I learned, and it's always nice to have someone. Yeah, I think what is so important as well is that idea of getting guys talking as well. Of course, it continues to break down those barriers and just show that having these emotions to what is a really horrific thing is so normal. But I always like to end on this one note, and that is, if you were to have a conversation with Ollie, what is it you'd say?
I probably would just say like, I kind of understand the situation you were in, because I felt like he was very lonely and very isolated with his feelings. And the more I get older and the more I've experienced things, like I kind of understand his position because we did grow up together and we experienced the same kind of things. Like I felt like he just didn't know how to express them. And I kind of want, if he was alive today, I'd probably like sit him down a lot more than I used to and just try to help him. So yeah, I'll just be like, I'm here for you if you need me.
Love it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, mate. And yeah, that's
Perfect.
it.
Thank you very much.
Brilliant.
I just want you to find your truth and stick to it. I know you'll be okay. I know it. From the bottom of my heart, I know it. I love you, Papa.